So have you ever wondered how those silky, smooth, ethereal looking seascapes are made? Today we're going to find out using my Sony Alpha 7R5 and the magnificent Marsden Beach and Rock over there. Join me this morning as we take ethereal seascapes. So I'm down here at Marsden Beach. I've been down here since 5 o'clock this morning, shooting the pre-dawn twilight, the sunrise, and the golden hour as the sun rose. I hope you can hear me above the shrieking of the seagulls on the cliffs above me. I'm sure you can. This is the seaside after all, so what is the seaside without some seagulls? I've been shooting long exposure seascapes with my Sony Alpha 7R5. Just here, and let's kick off this video by talking about what you need. And first of all, you don't need anything particularly special. You don't need the greatest camera in the world to do these shots. Any camera that will get a nice slow shutter speed, say 1 second or more, will work absolutely fine. You could even do it with a smartphone if you've got an app that will take you down to 1 second and below. You're probably going to need some neutral density filters. I have these Kase Magnetics on my camera at the moment. They literally just, you have a little magnetic filter adapter on the front and you just push it over the top and it will magnetically lock into place. You are, of course, going to need a tripod. You can't handhold at these sorts of exposure levels, so you really do need to have a tripod. And then all you need is a little bit of patience, a nice light and a nice seascape scene. Now, one of the more important things when you're shooting a seascape is you need to get down quite close to the water. The motion of the water is really exaggerated when your camera is close to it. So take some Wellington boots, be prepared to get wet. If your camera is not waterproof, think twice about using it, or perhaps get a waterproof housing or bag to go over it. Generally on a day like today, the sea's very benign, the tide's on the cusp of going out. You don't really need to worry too much. I got my feet wet a little bit, but the camera got nowhere near being wet. A wide-angle lens works really well because, again, exaggerates that motion of the waves and the expanse of the water. You can make that water in the scene much, much more expansive. But of course, you still need a subject. You must have a subject. It's all very well going to the beach and just shooting a little bit of the beach, the sky and the sea. That would work, but it won't look a great picture. So you need to have a subject in your image. And today I've got the Marsden Rock, and luckily there's a dead tree on the beach here, which has also made a fantastic device as a subject. So I've been able to use that. In terms of shutter speeds, that's going to vary. If you've got a tumultuous sea, a 1 or 2 second exposure is probably going to give you a really good looking ethereal water. On a day like today, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and even 4 minutes are the exposure times that you're really looking at. Keep your ISO at the absolute base level. Get your shutter speeds really, really slow. As slow as you can go, and you'll get more and more ethereal looking water. And don't forget, you can also bracket. You can bracket your images so that you can stack them later. And we'll have a little look at that later in Photoshop, and I'll show you how you can do that as well. And you can also exposure bracket and do HDR shots. That will automatically give you that stacked ethereal looking water. I've done all of those today. I've bracketed, I've used long exposures. I've even done a few shorter exposures just because it's such a pretty scene this morning. And you're going to need to experiment with different shutter speeds, different apertures. If you're using a nice foreground interest to lead your eye out to the subject, then obviously you're going to need an f22, perhaps an f16 to get that depth of field, or perhaps focus stack. If your subject is in the distance, then a wider aperture will work better, but you're going to need a bigger neutral density filter. Now, for the neutral densities I use, I've got a 3-stop, a 6-stop and a 10-stop. I've been using the 10-stop today because the sun's coming up, it's really, really bright, and I wanted to cut that exposure down really, really low. If you're shooting in the morning twilight, the evening twilight perhaps, then you may only need a 3 or 6-stop ND filter. So judge it as you go. Practice the exposure, do some exposures at say 1 or 2 seconds, do some exposures at 20, 30 seconds, and do some 3 or 4 minute exposures. It's important to scout out your locations as well. You don't want to turn up, particularly if you're shooting in the dawn, the early morning twilight, you don't want to turn up to an unfamiliar location and try and work out where the best angles are and what the best shots are. So pre-plan. If you can't get there in advance, then have a look on Google Earth, have a look on Google Maps. Very often there's a photosphere from a pretty beach, and you might be able to have a look around and get some ideas, the lay of the land, so to speak. So you can actually see where you actually want to take the photos. But it's always a good idea to have some pre-planning. And also plan the light. I know this beach. I know that the sun comes up just over there in this time, at this time of year in the summer. But if you're going to a new place, then perhaps get yourself a photo ephemeris. There is the one online called The Photographer's Ephemeris. I use an app called PhotoPills on here, which is really, really useful and pretty inexpensive. You can literally position yourself, check the time of day, check the date, and it will show you exactly where the sun will rise, the sun will set. It will show you the morning and evening twilights, the morning and evening golden hours, how long they are. Really, really powerful apps and really useful to have, particularly if you want to shoot ethereal water on a morning, in an evening, in a sunrise like today. As you can see, the sun's really coming up nicely now and lighting up my face. Now, my personal preference is to shoot manual mode, and the simple reason for that is that I can judge the exposure using the histogram, I can set my aperture, and then I can dial down my shutter speed. If my shutter speed's not going low enough, I can pull off the ND filter and put on another one. If it's extraordinarily bright, I might even stack 2 ND filters. If you do that, beware you might get vignetting, and that particularly on the wide-angled lenses, that might actually crop into your image. So do be careful of that. These ones are extraordinarily thin. They're not cheap, but they're really good quality. Hence they're thin, they're light, and you can stack probably 2 on a 24mm, perhaps even 3. I think if you went down to 20mm, you could still probably stack 2 on it. As I said earlier, you can stack images in Photoshop, and that's perfectly possible. But what we're also going to do is we're going to have a look at how to edit these in Lightroom, because actually taking the images is only half the story. You're almost certainly going to be shooting raw, and you really want to make sure that you punch those images out, because that raw file is going to look flat, the sky's going to look washed out, there's not going to be anything there, the sea's going to look really dull, no sheen to it. So editing is 50%, perhaps even 70% of the actual image. And we're going to go back to the studio right now and go through how to edit the images that I have taken this morning. So join me in the studio shortly. So welcome back to the studio. We're going to go into Lightroom and have a look at these images. Now, the day that I was there, as you could have seen, it was a very, very calm day and the water wasn't moving very much. So we're going to be stacking some images to try and get that ethereal looking water. Now, you remember when I said that wide angle lenses and getting close to the water work better generally than telephoto lenses because the water movement is exaggerated. Well, the same's true for the angle that you have with the water. If you're actually shooting the water square on, you're not going to get quite as much as an effect as if you've moved sort of perpendicular to that water, where you've got the waves coming in at 90 degrees to the camera angle. You're going to get much more effect of movement in that type of image. To demonstrate this, we'll head into Lightroom and have a look. So, as you can see, I've got 3 separate images here. 2 of them are 5-image brackets and one is a solo shot that I have edited. This first image here, I've actually carried out some edits already to enhance the sky and to try and reduce the texture in the water. And I've carried that over to the 4 other shots. As you can see, this is a 5-second exposure, and because we're at sort of 45 degrees to the water and the water's very, very calm, it's not made it as ethereal as we would like. So what we're going to do with this 5-image bracket is take that over to Lightroom and merge it. This particular image, as you can see here, I have edited into a more ethereal looking water. This is pretty much square on to the water, and as I say, very, very calm water. A 30-second exposure is not giving us the best ethereal looking water at all. With a little editing, it just improves a little bit, but it's not perfect by any means. And I will explain just how I edited that in a moment. And the last image, if I take the center one here, it's a 5-image bracket again, is taken at 90 degrees to the water. And you will see that at 20 seconds, which is 10 seconds less than the previous image, we do have some really good looking ethereal water. And that's purely because
the water is coming perpendicular to the camera, so it's moving more, it's more dramatic, even on a calm day like this. And what we're going to do with this one is we're going to merge it to HDR in Lightroom and see how that comes out. But first of all, let's just have a look at this image here. And I'll just quickly explain what I did. I'll take it over to the develop module. I won't explain the rest of the editing, the shadows and the skies and all that. But basically I used the masking, I used the landscape mask to mask out the water here, you can see. And what I've done with that water is I've reduced the texture and clarity to 0. And then I've copied the mask and doubled it up. So you've doubled the effect of losing that texture and clarity. And it does kind of work. It's not fantastic, but if I take that mask off with just one mask on now, and that's with both masks on. So it does work to a certain extent, but this is the effect of shooting square on a very calm day. You're not going to get great looking ethereal water. So let's take these images over to Photoshop and I'll show you another way that we can try and enhance the ethereal looking water when it hasn't worked out quite as well as it should have done. So we'll go edit in Photoshop. We'll just wait for Photoshop to open. So there we have the 5 images. You can see them in a tab over the top there. And the first thing that we're going to do is load them into a stack. So we need to go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. And you'll see here that we've got several options, but we're just going to use the Add Open Files. And I'm not going to attempt to automatically align the images because they are aligned. They were shot from a tripod. So let's click OK and we'll wait for those to load in. OK, so that's there. And you can now see all 5 images loaded into separate layers here. What we're going to do is we're going to take the top one, hold Shift, click on the bottom one to select them all. And we're going to go over to Layer, Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Object. Just take a few moments to do that. So what we do now, we have the stacked image selected here and we go to Layer, we go to Smart Objects, and then we go down here to Stack Mode and we click Mean. And as you can see, the water is much more ethereal. The image is a little bit bright, but we can always adjust that by coming to the curves here. And we can just pull down the shadow end a little bit, perhaps bring up the highlights a little bit, and just give it a little bit of an S curve there. And we've got a much better looking ethereal water. If we just pop back to Lightroom, you can see what the original looked like, and it's definitely taken out some of that texture, excessive texture in the water. So the last one we're going to do is we're going to merge these 5 shots into an HDR merge. This is the one that's perpendicular to the camera. You can see from these images that the water is much more ethereal. We're going to merge those all together into one single shot and see what we can get out of that. So we go Photo Merge HDR. We're going to keep the ghosting amount on none. Ghosting basically will find areas of the image that's changed and try and move them or clear them out, whereas we don't want to do that. We want to merge all those layers of the movement of the water together without any deghosting. And there we go. You can see that's come out quite nicely. We'll click the merge and just wait for that to come together. And that's the merged image, the HDR image. And you can see we've got a really nice ethereal looking water. We probably don't really need to do too much to this image. I'm not going to do any editing on it, but as you can see, by merging those 5 images of water that is already quite ethereal, you get this really, really nice looking ethereal water to the left here. And that's purely because we are taking those images perpendicular to the water. If you've got a really, really calm day, you need to get down nice and low with a wide angled lens and perpendicular to the water and get a nice long exposure. I think the exposures here range from 5 to 30 seconds, and that has actually worked. You're going to need longer exposure times if you're looking straight out at the water, and somewhere in between if you're looking at, say, 45 degrees to the water. So you really need to do a little bit of research on the weather, research on the tides, how the sea state's going to be on the day of your shoot, and then work accordingly. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Ethereal water is such an evocative look in a photograph, but quite tricky to do, particularly on a day like we had, where the water was very calm and there was no wind. It was very difficult to actually get ethereal water, even at 2, 4, 6 minute exposures.
What are your experiences with shooting ethereal water? Do you enjoy it? Have you tried it? What level of ND filters are you using? Let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, a like would be fantastic, a subscription would be even better, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.